Welcome to the Governor's Conference for Community Leaders on Safe Neighborhoods, a statewide effort to gather Utahns who want to create better and safer communities. This is a program of GIFT, the Governor's initiative on families today. Good morning. I'm Bruce Lindsay, and I'll be your host for this conference. First, let me introduce you to some important people who are behind our Safe Neighborhoods efforts. Seated with me are the chairs of GIFT, Governor Michael Leavitt and First Lady Jacqueline Leavitt. Welcome to both of you. We will be hearing from the Governor and Mrs. Leavitt in just a moment. We also want to give thanks to two people who have been the force behind today's conference. Elder Alexander B. Morrison, who is president of the Utah North area of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, and Sister Margot Kane, executive director of Catholic Community Services for Utah. They have served as co-chairs in creating this conference. We thank both of you very much. And we're glad that you would join us as well. Thousands of leaders from government, education, churches, law enforcement, other professionals are gathered across the state for this conference, and some are here in our studios, others at 30 additional sites all over Utah. We welcome them, and we welcome all of you who are watching this broadcast from your homes. As the title of this conference explains, we're here to talk about safe neighborhoods, how to make the places we live freer from the effects of theft, assault, gang activity, and other crimes. Governor, I'm going to ask you to tell us how you see this Safe Neighborhoods efforts, which is a grassroots effort, in relation to what law enforcement is already doing.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm very pleased to be with you and welcome all of you here to the 1998 conference. You'll be hearing a lot today about safe neighborhoods. Raising 5 children, Jackie and I have discovered that, at least in our home, safe communities is sometimes as basic as keeping an accurate head count and knowing the quickest way to our emergency room. But it seems that parents, as parents, we really have to worry a lot more than we ever have before. Crime remains a paramount concern. Every day, a parent has this conflict. We want our children to be adventurous and independent, and yet we want them to be safe. That internal debate happens to us each day almost. Do you let your 8-year-old ride a bike alone through the neighborhood? What do you know about your high school daughter's friends? How do you teach your children to be careful without making them fearful? Utah's growing explosively, and while the upside of that is progress and a buoyant economy, there's also a downside. More people means more crime. The first order of business of government is to make safe neighborhoods and to keep our citizens safe. At the state level, we build and expand prisons and punish offenders. The government makes the laws and maintains police forces. But let me tell you what government cannot do. The Salt Lake Tribune reported recently that drive-by shootings in Salt Lake County fell 39% in 1997. Thefts and robberies and graffiti and vandalism and sexual assaults were also down. Guess who law enforcement officials credited for that? You. They attributed the drop to residents that decided that they were going to watch for their communities and watch out for them and started patrolling them. With wits and a sharp eye and a cell phone, they made a big difference. There are nearly 1,000 of those citizen patrollers in Salt Lake City alone. It takes devotion and will, and sometimes it just requires even less. In January, the man responsible for the abduction and the assault of a 9-year-old girl was caught. He was arrested by police because a woman noticed him in his truck as he was confronting another little girl on her way to school. The woman saw what was happening. She cared enough to drive over and to simply check it out. It scared the man off, but not before she wrote down his license plate. Now, instead of having a child that was traumatized, we have a dangerous child molester that's behind bars. Another compelling story from another Salt Lake neighborhood struck me as well. In May of 1996, police received 27 calls for assistance in this one neighborhood in Central City. But through the ensuing year, the average has fallen to just 1 assault and 1 larceny a month. That's quite a drop. And no one is absolutely sure why it's happened. Some have credited a phenomenon in which criminal behavior is diminished when residents add lights to their yards or trim shrubs, or when the area attracts a lot of people, making it harder for a criminal to commit a crime in secrecy. Now, this particular area had been overrun suddenly by a lot of people. Therein lies a second explanation. A month or so before the crime rate dropped, A woman who lived in the area told a story that had been picked up by the press. She had seen a religious figure, or the figure of a religious figure, in the branch of an elm tree near her home. And people from around the neighborhood and from around the city came to see it. Candles started showing up at the base of this tree. Some people even stopped there to pause and to pray. Others left flowers. And residents who had previously not been willing to go out at night unless they had to, now felt willing to stroll around the neighborhood with their children. Believe what you will, and some will surely belittle this story, but it doesn't matter. What does matter is that that neighborhood believed something special had occurred there, and that belief changed that neighborhood. Crime dropped. The purpose of these stories is simply to illustrate the power of one individual, the ability of a small group to effect change, and the forces that motivate goodness. If you ever doubted that one person can make a difference, just ask the family of that little girl who was spared the probable trauma because of the intervention of one stranger. This is the strength of a government of the people and by the people. And these are the times that require that we wield it. A few months ago, I announced a program called Alert. This is a program that essentially has two components. A law enforcement component calling for more police and more prison space and new technology for crime fighters, and a community component that challenged our schools and our churches and our businesses and our community organizations, and most of all, each of us as individuals, to step up and to prevent crime. That second component is called Utah's Promise. Its focus is volunteer service, and among its five goals is a safe haven for every Utah child. Toward that goal, I proposed that every high school area in Utah have established and operating crime council. Now, there are currently 35 of them, and there are more forming. These community organizations can prevent crime from occurring, and they increase the security of our neighborhoods and our homes. If you're unable to join a council or a neighborhood watch patrol, you can still watch in your neighborhood. No one can solve the crime problem single-handedly, but each of us can look down our street and ask the question, is there a child out there that needs a place to go after school? Is there an elderly man or a woman that we could look in on regularly? Can I offer support rather than silence to a neighbor that I suspect may have been beaten by her partner or spouse? Person by person, street by street, neighborhood by neighborhood, we can make a difference.
And Governor, without that type of grassroots involvement, are you suggesting that law enforcement's efforts are forever limited?
I don't think we'll ever have enough policemen without our neighbors and our friends and our families being supportive of them. Community after community have found that to be correct. The whole idea of community policing that I think will be talked about is dependent upon people taking ownership of their own communities and their own neighborhoods and making a difference. And we can do that in every neighborhood in Utah.
Mrs. Levitt, it would sound that many of the solutions to these neighborhood crime problems are really family-based. Absolutely.
And I'd like to expand on some of the ways that we as parents can raise our children to be partners in a safe neighborhood. How we talk to our children about the dangers of drugs and how parents exercise control in a society where sex and violence are staples on television are two distinct areas where we can bolster our youth. I have some how-tos for parents from the National Crime Prevention Council that may offer some degree of protection as well as peace of mind. A positive relationship is the bedrock principle. Let your child know that he or she can tell you anything and that you will listen and support them. Open communication is one of the most effective tools in helping your child avoid drug use. Talking freely and really listening shows children that they mean a great deal to you. As a parent, it is important that you take a stand, educate yourself about the facts surrounding alcohol and drug use, and establish clear family rules. Joseph Califano, a former Carter administration health secretary who went on to found the Center on Addiction and Substance Abuse at Columbia University, says that there are 7 ways that a family can do things together to set their children on a path away from drug use. First, going to church. Second, eating meals together. Third, doing homework together. Fourth, being involved in activities such as athletics. Fifth, having a curfew. Sixth, choosing friends who don't use drugs. And seventh, reinforcing your belief that drugs are morally wrong. That seventh simple step is often overlooked. Tell your children that you do not find alcohol and illegal drugs acceptable. Now, surprising as it sounds, many parents never state that fundamental principle and reinforce that. A great teaching moment occurred one day in our family as we passed a billboard across the street from the high school where our children attend. A couple who had endured the sorrow of losing a son to drugs decided to help others by warning them. Their sign read, "You think you can handle drugs? So did Andrew Plum, born January 1st, 1974, died May 14th, 1996. One's family sadness was channeled toward sparing another family similar pain. Family communication arms youth against the very real threat of drugs. You can develop your parenting skills through seminars. This can be helpful. For example, GIFT, Governor's Initiative on Families Today, sponsors family conferences throughout the states. Networking with other parents, reading, counseling, and support groups, all of these can be helpful. Connecting with your children's friends and getting to know the youth in your neighborhood are invaluable in terms of alertness and in building interaction that strengthens a whole neighborhood. If you don't believe we have a society that is saturated with violence and sex, you only have to turn on the television. Now, American kids spend more time each week watching TV than in any other activity except sleeping. So television has enormous potential to educate, but it can also do harm. Exposing children to violence can make them less sensitive to the pain and suffering of others, more fearful of the world, and more willing to act aggressively. Sex and violence are also widespread in music, video games, books, magazines, and movies. Take a hard look at what you and your family watch on TV and ask the same questions about other media. What values are they teaching? Do they make violence appear glamorous or exciting? And is sex cheapened or trivialized? Fortunately, parents have some controls. Most of it can be turned off or tuned out. Also, high-tech tools can help parents monitor what their children are watching. The newest device is the V-Chip, which allows the TV to be programmed to block shows rated high in violence, sexual content, or language not suited for young viewers. Many cable companies offer parents the option of locking out channels that they don't want their children to see. Similar technology exists to filter internet material. As wonderful as the information age is, it puts destructive materials at our children's fingertips. One way parents can make it less accessible is through the open door policy. That is, simply make sure that the door to any room with a computer is left open. In closing, remember that these are only tools. Nothing can take the place of a parent in influencing a child's habits, and there is no greater contribution to society than that of a parent who lovingly and unfailingly fulfills that responsibility.
Thank you, Mrs. Levitt. Very practical, very doable suggestions. And now we'll hear from someone else you'll recognize as very well versed on the subject of crime, and that is the mayor of New York City. One writer once called New York the symbol of urban violence, but you may be surprised to hear that now recent FBI reports put violent crime in New York City at a 25-year low. That means the crime rate in New York City is on par with the crime rate in Boise, Idaho. From this interview conducted by New York Public Relations Executive and former Utahn Steve Coltrane, we'll hear how Mayor Rudolph Giuliani made even New York City a safer place to live.
Mayor Giuliani, you have done a remarkable thing in the view of most of us in this city. I think it would be very interesting. You have received the endorsement this time of all of the major newspapers in New York City, even though you're a Republican, I might say. And part of that endorsement, I think especially the New York Times, was based on your fiscal performance and the role that you've had in reducing crime. think we would be very interested to know, how did this happen? I knew briefly Mayor Dinkins at a cocktail party. Not that I knew him, but I met him a few times, and others. And I remember many people said, New York is what it is. It will never change. What was your view when you came in? How did this happen?
My view was that that was a defeatist, way of looking at it. That the city, in essence, what they were saying was the city of New York was deteriorating, crime was getting worse, welfare was going up, the conditions, physical conditions of the city were deteriorating, and there's nothing we can do about it except watch it and make excuses for it and run to Washington and ask for help, but never do anything in return for that help. And I thought we had to change it, that we had one good opportunity before the turn of the century to change the direction of New York City, and that we had to start with crime, that the starting point had to be, let's show that we can take the city that's thought of as the crime capital in America and make it a lot safer. So I was aided by the fact that my background has been in law enforcement. I was an assistant United States attorney, a United States attorney. I was the third-ranking official in the Justice Department under President Reagan in the early 1980s. So I understood law enforcement. And we tried to change the approach of the police and the communities to crime. We instituted what was called the broken windows theory, things that the police department used to not pay attention to, or like street-level drug dealing and prostitution and things that they would say, since we have so many murders, we can't pay attention to these things. We instituted this theory that you have to pay attention to everything, that it's not acceptable to turn your streets over to drug dealers or prostitutes, and although we can't deal with all of it, we're certainly not going to let people have immunity to do it. We cleaned up the pornography on 42nd Street. We dealt with aggressive panhandlers. We dealt with some of the issues that people thought could never be dealt with. And then we also had a management and scientific approach to it. We instituted a program called the CompStat program, in which we measured crime every single day in the city, in every single precinct. Instead of waiting until the end of the year when you report to the FBI, every single precinct would report its crime statistics at midnight. And then after a few days, you could see the precincts and the commanding officers that were doing a good job and the ones that weren't, and what you needed to do to reduce auto theft, or what you needed to do to reduce felonious assault. Or maybe a youth gang was operating in a certain part of the city and would not have been noticed for a year later, but we would notice it in 2 or 3 days, and we could send more police officers there. So we changed the way in which the police department evaluated itself and turned it into an organization that evaluated itself based on what kind of job are we doing of actually reducing crime. And I tried to create the concept in the police department that they're police precincts, and we're very large in New York City. We have a police department of 38,000 police officers, 77 separate police precincts. But we tried to turn them into, in this way, like a business. And if a business has 77 branch offices, and one of them, or 2 of them, or 3 of them are losing money for a period of time, everybody figures out what to do about it. So when we'd have precincts in which crime was going up instead of down, then there had to be a plan as to what you would do about it. We also put tremendous emphasis on drug trafficking. We've increased the number of arrests of drug dealers by 40, 50,000 since I've come into office per year, because we thought that a lot of the crime problems emerging for the city came from drugs, and we've reduced that quite a bit. Not as much as I would like. That's one of our major initiatives now, is to try to reduce drug trafficking and drug use to whatever level we can get it down to. I'd like to eliminate it if I could.
Now, let me come back to the broken windows theory for a minute. Now, so how does that work? You sense that there was an opportunity there, and is the reason that it works because it sends a message that says these things are important, the lie is important? How does that work?
The broken windows theory is best described with a little story about it, which is, if a person has a house, big house, a lot of windows, and somebody breaks the first window, and they don't do anything about it. They say, well, it's not important enough. It's just one window. What's the difference? Then somebody breaks a second window and a third window. And you're almost telling people, break my windows. On the other hand, if somebody breaks the window of your house, and you fix it right away, and you try to find the person responsible for it, and you make it clear you don't want people to break the window of your house, because ultimately the whole house can fall down if all the windows get broken, then you're dealing with these problems at an earlier stage of development. Now, other cities had used the broken windows theory. It comes from Professor Wilson and Professor Kelling, who wrote about this 20 years ago. Other small cities had used this, and it worked. The question was, always in New York, it would never work in New York City. It's part of the New York cynicism, because New York is too big. And I thought we had no other choice but to try it, because crime was going up in such high levels. Right before I came into office under my predecessor, we set records for murder for 4 straight years. So I thought we had to try it, and we did. So we concentrated on things that had been ignored in the past. Aggressive panhandlers who would threaten people in order to get money. People who would make too much noise and disturb other people. Graffiti operators who, in the name of art, deface other people's property and were just allowed to do it. So what we thought was, if we put emphasis on that fare beaters, people who use the subways, they don't pay their fare. We thought if we put emphasis on that we would be dealing with some of these criminals at an earlier stage of development, and that we would, over a period of time, be reinforcing a different message, which is the same one we reinforce now with welfare, which is, you have responsibilities. This isn't like, you can't live in society and say, I can do anything I want to do anytime I want to do it. I can, because I think it's art, I can go up to your house and draw pictures on your house. Or because I'd like to have some money, I can threaten you. We had to teach people at the grassroots the social contract, that there are responsibilities that you have, that freedom is a combination of the ability to do what you want, but regulated by the fact that the rights of other people have to be respected.
So this is a sort of early intervention which then kept criminals from progressing up the scale of eventually to serious crime?
And then teaching young people in the neighborhoods of New York City a different lesson. The lesson they used to learn in New York City, let's say in a poor neighborhood, was that the drug dealers control the community. Not the police, the drug dealers. Not the teachers, not the clergy members, but the drug dealers. They were the people who were running neighborhoods. The police wouldn't arrest them. When the police did, they'd be back there in a minute selling drugs again. So we had to reverse that in a big way. We had to go in, show the young people in the community that drug dealers were not tolerated, arrest them, try to keep them off the streets for as long as possible, and then in that way to empower the other members of the community, the members of the clergy, the community leaders, the decent people who are the majority in any community, give them a chance to get their message across. And I think that has had a lot to do with the fact that now we're 4.5 years later. When I came into office, we were averaging 2,000 murders a year in New York City. Last year, we had 780. So it's been reduced by over 60%. We've reduced crime more in New York City in the last 4 years than any city, large or small, in America. So it's working. I mean, our numbers are still large because we have a lot of people. But the fact is the city is considerably safer now. And the place where you feel it the most are in the poorer neighborhoods of the city, where we have some neighborhoods in which crime, murder, is down 70 and 80%. And for the first time, maybe in 2 or 3 generations, people feel free to go to the library. They feel free to play on the streets. It isn't perfect. I wish it were utopia. Everybody does. But it's a lot better than it was 4 or 5 years ago. And now when people look at New York City, they look at it for a purpose other than being a crime capital. They look at it and say, it's an example of how you reduce crime dramatically.
How did you get from a point where nobody maybe bought into this concept to a point where it's been so successfully implemented? Did you involve community leaders? What kinds of things did you do to get the community support with regard to this kind of approach, which is radically different from anything done in New York City, at least since I've been here?
We kept explaining it. Used every opportunity we possibly could to explain what we were trying to do. Television, radio, town hall meetings, individual meetings with people, explaining what we were trying to do against a very, very large barrage of cynicism, particularly on the part of a lot of the established press. I remember when I first announced that we were going to try to eliminate squeegee operators. Squeegee operators were people who would come right into the street, want money from you for cleaning your car windows, and then if you didn't give them the money, they would threaten you, smash your tires, yell at you, scream at you, or just act in an intimidating way, so that it was pretty clear you didn't have much choice. And it was really frightening people in the city, driving people out of the city of New York, and even cutting down our economic and commercial opportunities. So I said, we're going to do the best that we can to eliminate these people. I was ridiculed by, I'd say, honestly, a third of the press in the city. But I knew that the people of the city understood this. I knew that I could reach out over them, in essence, through radio, television, just talking to people, and say, look, you know, this is the cynicism we've been dealing with for 30, 40 years. We can do something about this. And what we did was build on small successes. And you had the first success. In a few months, the squeegee operators were not totally eliminated, but reduced dramatically. It was far easier than people thought. The first year, the crime went down in double digits. People were very surprised, and it gave the momentum and the confidence that we could go forward with the rest of the broken windows theory. The idea was to create some small successes first, and then people would have confidence in taking on the bigger things, like murder, drugs, which we did, you know, as the years went by, second year, third year, fourth year.
So you pushed the social contract, and you pushed it with community leaders, with church leaders, with school leaders.
I found it much, much easier to explain the reasons for the changes that we had to make in our approach to crime, our approach to welfare, our approach to jobs, the broken windows theory, by talking to people in the community than I did talking to the sort of what you would call New York establishment, who had become very cynical about all this. And if the things that I'm saying now, even 4.5 years ago, if I would go to a community and explain this, there'd be a vast majority of support for wanting to try these things, because people were really fed up with the fear that they lived in, the large numbers of people that weren't working and didn't have prospects of any kind of work. The people themselves that were in that situation were very frustrated and annoyed, much less the people that actually would surround it and watch it.
This leads to, I think, an interesting question. Many individuals in New York City, and probably elsewhere, and I'm sure this is true in Utah as well, say, I'm an individual. What can I do? How can I have an impact on crime? Now, you can't take the law into your own hands. What can an individual do?
There are a number of things that they can do. Some of the most notorious crimes that have been committed since I've been the mayor the last 4.5 years, we actually reached out to the community and got them to help us in solving it by reporting observations to us, telling us about things, making people just more aware of how they can report activity that is regarded as suspicious or dangerous activity. And the second way they can do it is we have all throughout the city what are called precinct councils. We ask members of the community to, on a regular basis, meet with the police, talk to them about their problems, create much closer relationships outside of the context of the police having to go there just to enforce the law. Now, some of the precinct councils work better than others, but all of them create an interchange that is necessary in the different parts of the city. Because, frankly, the crime problems and quality of life problems are different. The city of New York is very varied. It is the largest urban area in this country, the most densely populated urban area in the country, America's largest city. We also have suburban areas in the city of New York, and in Staten Island and other parts, we have actual rural areas. So it's a very, very, the things that would be necessary for the police to interact with the community in some part of Staten Island might be very different than the middle of Manhattan. So you need these precinct councils where citizens interact with the police. They meet on a regular basis. They have a whole agenda of things that they discuss. And then when a problem emerges, there's the relationships there for the police to know who they can deal with, and for the people in the community to know who they can deal with the police.
So the police and the people of the community have more of, what would you call it, a partnership feeling towards each other, at least a cooperative feeling?
Much more so than had been the case before, where the sense had always been the police are separate, they do their own thing, people really shouldn't enter into those discussions with them, and we've pretty thoroughly broken that down now, so that if you went into any precinct of the 77 in New York City, you would see that there are regularly scheduled precinct council meetings. There's a forum, a procedure for the community to let the police know what concerns them, and the other way around. The police have a right to ask things from members of the community.
I've noticed that the petty crime has pretty much disappeared from this city. At least it's not very visible. The petty criminals, as you implemented this policy, did they begin to do productive things? Did you have successes in moving them from one type of life, heading them down a difficult path?
I think that's a very good observation, because that's the level at which you can actually change people's behavior. The minor criminal, the petty criminal, the person who's not a habitual career criminal. For those people, I think it's a combination of persuading them that it isn't worth it, maybe even creating some lessons where they see that there are other ways to lead your life. I remember one of the first squeegee operators rather reluctantly said he was now going to take a job. And I said, this is a good thing. Maybe that reluctance will turn into acceptance, and that's the way people move from not working to working and embracing it as part of their life. With the serious criminals, the hard fact is they largely have to be in prison.
Right.
And part of the reason why crime is down so much in New York City is because we have a lot of people in jail and we have a lot of people in prison. If those people that are in city jails and state prisons were on the streets, our crime rates would be, if not what they were before, a lot higher than they are right now. And with the career criminal and the habitual criminal, then the answer is, strong, tough law enforcement and long prison sentences. And until we can figure out how to deal with that kind of behavior in a more effective way, a safer way, that really is the answer that is utilized.
So you've utilized the precinct councils and good law enforcement, sort of a partnership with the police, to put the hardened criminals away, not to let it drag on and on, just to get that solved, get them put away.
Yes, it's my belief that after you've shown that you're going to harm other people in society, then until it's quite clear that this problem is straightened out, you've got to be removed.
Mayor Giuliani, we've taken a lot of your time, in fact, about as much as we're allocated here. I would like to ask, just in summary, two questions. Are there things that many people that are watching you in Utah today that are community leaders, could you say there are three things they absolutely should do, or two things, or four things from your experience?
Sure, absolutely. There are plenty of things I can learn from their experience, and we have. A lot of the things we're doing, we've learned from other parts of the country. I think that being able to create relationships with communities, not only for the police but for government, is enormously important, and bringing the community into it. And for public officials, public leaders, to have their own separate relationships and ways of communicating with the community rather than always through the press. You need to be able to explain the rationale for your position. Obviously, the press is an important part of it, but you need your own personal dialogue.
That would be the precinct councils?
Precinct councils. I do town hall meetings every month. I'm on the radio once a week, just taking questions from people. I can't talk to everyone in a city that's this large, but I can get a sense of the pulse of the city that way. What's really concerning people? I think that's enormously important. Creates a sense of community interest. And constantly reinforcing the fact that everything in society is reciprocal. From the smallest town to the largest city, it only works if there's reciprocity. If the city and the town is doing something for you, you're doing something for the city and the town. And ultimately, the balance has to be that people are doing more things for the city or town than they're taking out of it. So this idea of reciprocity, social contract, responsibility, accountability is enormously important. It's the thing that ultimately reduces crime. It's the thing that ultimately eliminates welfare or reduces it to where it is absolutely necessary. And that's something that, New York City is united with the smallest town in America in the need for that social contract, that reciprocity, that sense among its citizens that they have to give more to the city than they can actually take from the city.
Mayor Giuliani, we salute you. We thank you.
Thank you.
And we invite you to come to Utah when you can.
I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you.
And congratulations to everyone there, and particularly to the governor.
If they can effect that kind of impressive change in New York, think what the possibilities are for us in Nephi and Newton and Newcastle, much closer to home. If I could summarize some of Mayor Giuliani's points, he said the keys to reducing crime are to fix the broken windows. In other words, don't let even petty crime go unpunished. Crime should be measured and reported daily, not annually. and teach the social reciprocity contract, which is a society is only as good as the number of people who contribute to it. It's not measured by how much it's giving out. Mayor Giuliani emphasized the importance of good community relations by its leaders, that is, participating in town hall meetings, radio talk shows, and in individual community meetings. And he listed several methods of producing safer neighborhoods, including creating community watch programs, community police councils where citizens and police precincts make plans to help each other reduce neighborhood crime. Now, our next guest can emphasize how crime prevention and safe neighborhoods come about only when everyone in the community shares the responsibility. He also knows a great deal about how crime affects young people. Larry Echohawk has served as Attorney General in the state of Idaho. Now a professor of law at Brigham Young University, Mr. Echohawk knows about the needs of rural communities as well as the legal means we may employ to make our neighborhoods safer. Please join me in welcoming Larry Echohawk.
Thank you, Bruce. Let me begin by telling you of a concept of government that I think should give us guidance as we consider the task of creating safe neighborhoods in Utah. When Europeans first came upon the American continent along the eastern seaboard area, they came in contact with a well-developed government known as the Iroquois Confederacy. The Iroquois had a concept of government known as the seventh generation. They said, in our way of life, in our government, with every decision we make, we always keep in mind 7 generations ahead. It is our challenge to see that we leave behind a world that is better than the one we live in today. As we consider making safe neighborhoods, I think that we have to address certainly the present challenges, but also keep in mind that the actions that we take today will impact the future generations. To add just a little more perspective to this, I would like to speak in a personal way about the past as well. Echohawk, that name was given to my great-grandfather in the mid-1800s, a Pawnee Indian. He did not speak English. Among the Pawnee, the hawk is a symbol of a warrior, and my great-grandfather was known for his bravery, but he was also known as a quiet person. He didn't speak of his own deeds or accomplishments, but other members of the village did, and as they did so, it was like an echo from one side of the village to the other, and thus the elders of the tribe named him Echohawk, the hawk whose deeds are echoed. I'm very proud of that name and of my Pawnee Indian heritage. But I'm also very mindful of the fact that Echohawk in his generation experienced great hardship and struggle, a struggle just merely to survive, because at one time the Pawnee Indian people numbered nearly 20,000. But in 1874, the Pawnee were forced to remove from their homeland to a small reservation in Oklahoma. And as they were registered there by military authorities on the reservation, there were less than 750 that remained. The challenges of that generation continued to the next generation of my grandfather and into my father's generation. But in my generation, along with my 5 brothers and sisters, we have truly realized the very best that this country has to offer, the promise of America. All 6 of us had an opportunity to go to college. All 6 of us have a wonderful life today. I believe in America. I believe in the spirit of America that says, regardless of who you are, this is a land of opportunity for all people. I have seen what was in our past, but I see very clearly what we all can become. But for too many, the pain goes on and the promise of America is unfulfilled because there are too many, especially our young people, that live in poverty. There are too many of our young people that have to witness violence, domestic violence in their home. There are too many that are victims of abuse in their early years. There are too many of our young people that fall prey to the influence of alcohol and illegal drugs. And then they drop out of school. They are attracted to gangs. they turn to crime and then violence. When that happens, that prosperity of America that is there for a promise is not realized by these young people, but more importantly, whenever this happens, the promise of America for law-abiding citizens is threatened. Crime is the scourge of America. It threatens that promise across the nation, and Utah is not immune from that danger. I'd like to share with you an experience that I had when I served as a state attorney general. Being the chief law enforcement officer, one day I found myself walking on a rural highway. This is one of my most vivid memories during the time that I served, because there's a visual thing that I will always remember. As I walked down this rural highway in the winter months of the year, I saw something that was remarkable. In front of me, for nearly a mile, on both sides of this roadway were parked cars, bumper to bumper. And the reason it was such a visual thing was that these were police cars. They had their overhead lights flashing, and it was an eerie thing. It was a foggy day, and it seems like the lights were reflecting off of those darkened clouds. There were uniformed officers standing at attention next to those cars. I'd just come from a gymnasium in this small rural community where a memorial service had been held, where a standing room only crowd had been gathered to pay their respects to a father, a husband, a police officer that had been senselessly gunned down by a 14-year-old boy. And I was walking toward the graveside services that day to pay my respects as an official of the state. As we gathered there, it was an impressive ceremony. And as we concluded, I remember that I just thought maybe I ought to say something to this young mother with her 4 children at her side. And I walked up, I extended my hand, and I said, on behalf of the people of the state, I want to express our deepest sympathy for the loss that you have suffered. In response, she broke into tears, and I felt badly that maybe I had triggered something, and she was sobbing very deeply, and I embraced her, and it seemed like an endless time that she was crying, and then she began to gather her composure. She looked up at me with those tears in her eyes, and she said words that I will never forget. She said, "Please, Mr. Echohawk, do everything you can to make sure that this does not happen to someone else." Those words haunted me for weeks to come, because I was a law enforcement officer. I had a special responsibility to uphold the laws of the state, to prosecute those people that violate laws, to recommend laws for change to the legislature. And I kept wondering, am I doing enough? But I finally came to the realization that it is not just the responsibility of an attorney general or a prosecutor or a police agency. This is a shared responsibility, a responsibility held by each and every member of our community to make sure that we all pay attention, give respect to the law, and make sure that if we see that laws are broken, that we report that. To the credit of this widow that day that I spoke to, when she spoke about that loss, she was not only speaking about her personal loss, the fact that her 4 children would not have a father to raise them. She was speaking also about that 14-year-old boy. I was able later to listen to her speak, and her concern went to what happened with that individual. We must truly turn our hearts to our children to make a difference. Our children hold our future in their hands. Think about that. If the hands of our children are strong and capable and gentle and giving, then our future is very bright, because one day those small hands of today are going to build our homes and our schools. They're going to construct our highways and our bridges. They're going to drive the school buses and maybe even pilot the space shuttle. One day, with proper care, those hands will perform delicate surgery to heal the sick. And most importantly, one day, those hands, as they grow, will hold smaller hands in a gentle grasp as they prepare them to reach out for their future. But those same hands can lead to a different and a darker world. Because you see, they can reach out and grab selfishly. They can make a fist, and that fist can strike out in anger. Those hands can grab a knife. They can brandish a gun. They can take a life. If we allow them to do that, then we will have a dark future ahead of us. I have seen those faces of our young people when they make the mistakes and they enter into a life of crime. As a prosecuting attorney, I had the unfortunate responsibility of prosecuting two 18-year-old young men. These were separate cases for premeditated first-degree murder. They're both serving life sentences in prison. I also saw a 17-year-old boy who didn't have a mother and father, and he had gone wayward. His grandmother had tried to help him. I remember him standing in a courtroom shackled, chains on his feet and his hands, preparing for his sentencing. I knew that the judge would send him to the state penitentiary. I looked out in the courtroom that day and I saw his grandmother with tears in her eyes because of the destiny that lay ahead of him. And yes, I even saw a young adult who was raised here in Utah, brought up in a religious environment. He was laying on his back on a gurney, strapped down in the death chamber of the Idaho Penitentiary. That is what crime leads to. It can rob the promise of our future. We cannot afford to let that happen. We are our brother's keeper. For these young people that come from dysfunctional homes, there may be some of us that have to reach out and to give them love and to put our arms around them and help to show them the way. That phrase that I'm sure you've heard, it takes an entire village to raise a child. I wish it wasn't so. I wish it wasn't so. But some children will need us to help guide them along. For those of us who have received that prosperity and promise of America, I would only say that we carry a special obligation to return something for what we've received. Our communities need our time and our talents. They need us to volunteer, to participate in public service. And there is no higher calling in life than to give of your time and your talents to lift other people that are in need. Volunteers are needed critically to become involved in the mentoring programs, to become involved in crime prevention councils and neighborhood watch programs. I just give you a challenge that you will take your time and offer that up to help other people, because you do have the power to change the lives of people, to reduce the pain and to bring forth the promise, not only in the present generation, but yes, for 7 generations to come. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Echohawk, for reminding us of the enormity of this challenge, the critical responsibility we have to make our neighborhoods and our communities safe. So we've heard now from some of the authorities, and now we'd like to turn to you, the citizens, the professionals, the leaders in our communities. What unique problems do you have in your neighborhoods? What solutions do you know of that might work in other towns? Now, to get this discussion going, I'd like to ask our conference co-chairs, is it really possible for ordinary citizens to take control of their community's safety and their future? Alder Morrison?
Absolutely, Bruce. It's absolutely possible to do so. If ordinary citizens are to take control of their destinies, they have the opportunity to do that. The point of this whole conference is to drive home that point, that the people across this state can and must take charge of their communities. To paraphrase Edmund Burke, the great English philosopher, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good people do nothing.
Thank you. Sister Margot?
And we'd like to have everyone do something. No organization or group has a monopoly on responsibility or concern for these problems. Everyone is needed. We are training local gift chairs in every community in Utah to know how to support community crime prevention councils and other safe neighborhood projects.
Sounds like a real grassroots kind of an operation.
Oh yes, we believe that local problems respond best to local solutions. And with the example we are seeing in this conference and in the training sessions, we know that many people will come up with good ideas.
The key to success in creating safe neighborhoods is volunteerism. Every community needs an active crime prevention council and a variety of other safe neighborhood councils as well. And these councils need trained, committed volunteers. We just can't turn these issues over to the police.
How does a person get involved in a crime prevention council?
Oh, it's really very simple. Just call your local gift chairperson. He or she can help to find out who that person is in your area. Call this number, 801-538-3985. Let me repeat that, 801-538-3985.
Sister Margot, how does a community involve everyone in working for safe neighborhoods?
It starts by people realizing that everyone is needed. If you would look to your child to be able to walk down the street without being in danger, then write down that phone number, call your community chair, and volunteer some time. It needs to become an all-consuming commitment, but we need a few hours of your time.
That's right. Promoting, supporting, and participating in safe neighborhood projects will do a lot to prevent crime and other community problems. And we all agree that prevention is more effective than cure.
Thank you, Elder Morris and Sister Margot. Perhaps we have a piece of the solution in success stories from a couple of communities, both using the same program to reduce crime. One of these communities is Rose Park in Salt Lake City. The other, Camas, is decidedly more rural, but in each community, volunteers say they have reduced crime with a version of the Mobile Watch program.
It's time for Dion Kazir to go to work. The magnetic sign on her car doesn't mean she and partner Gene Polson are selling anything, although it is an advertisement of sorts. An advertisement for crooks.
Mobile Neighborhood Watch is very visible. They go around with signs on their cars. They're equipped with telephones, VCR recorders, anything that they need to film or document information on suspicious activity.
Kathy Gunn coordinates 981 Mobile Neighborhood Watch volunteers in Salt Lake City. 125 of them are in Rose Park. Salt Lake City police consider folks like Gene and Dion the backbone of safe neighborhoods. Why? Consider this. In 1978, 364 Salt Lake City police officers handled 137,000 calls. 19 years later, with only 400 officers, the city took 219,000 calls. That increased police response time from minutes to hours in some cases.
Neighborhoods were seeing a lot of drive-by shootings, a lot of gang activity, a lot of daytime burglaries, and felt a need to get involved.
When Rose Park Mobile Neighborhood Watch hit the streets 5 years ago, daytime burglaries dropped 42% in the first year. Vandalism and other petty crimes declined considerably as well. Some volunteers, like Gene and Dion, invest a lot of time patrolling. Police say Mobile Neighborhood Watch volunteers may donate anywhere from 2 hours a month and up. It's a proven method to reduce big city crime.
We spend at least 20 hours a week, minimal, and that's in the car patrolling.
But you may be surprised that mobile watch operations can be just as effective in small communities like Camas. With only 2 police officers in town, a traffic stop effectively ties up half the force. Unless Dan Littledyke and John Hoyt are on patrol. They are businessmen who decided they'd had enough of crime in Camas.
But we had a recent occurrence of vandalism about 1.5 years ago that brought it all to light. And many of us in the city decided that it was proper time.
The time was right because Police Chief Eric Ovart happened to have an extra car. Since turning over the keys and a radio to a group of business owners, he found the volunteers were more effective dealing with wayward kids than the police were.
They're more reluctant in mommy and dad getting involved, and if anybody's going to do that, it's my community policing people. They're going to let mom and dad know what their kid was doing, and I don't even have to be involved.
All right, now it's your turn, Mom and Dad. You have to be involved. Audience participation time. Are there any other communities represented here that have tried variations of this mobile watch? Would you introduce yourself?
I'm Kay Grohl, and I would like to direct a comment to Governor and Mrs. Leavitt, if I could.
Please.
I hear this continual comment that, well, we don't have any crime problems. We're just fine. No problems here. And so, in your opinion, how do you feel that the programs such as GIFT and Utah Promise can help alert our citizens that we actually do have a serious problem, that we do need to be organized and be trained so that we can use prevention and intervention in order to decrease this serious crime that we have?
Well, as Mayor Giuliani said in our earlier segment, one of the most important things to do is to just mobilize citizens to be watching. And programs such as this, the kinds of things we have seen in the Citizen Watch programs, ultimately will spell a difference. We will never have enough police officers that police can respond to every instance. We have to be preventing, it has to be parents involved, it has to be neighborhoods. Once we do that, once we take control of this, one neighborhood, one family, one at a time, we'll be able to reduce the amount of crime we have. Both property crime and violent crime will come down even more.
I see Salt Lake Police Chief Ruben Ortega here. Maybe you could speak to the issue of property crime as well as violent crime being decreased, if it is, by neighborhood watch programs in Salt Lake.
Well, there's no question that property crime is one of our biggest crime problems in the state of Utah. What we just saw here, the community-oriented policing, the mobile watch program, is the policing of the future, I feel, as well as some of my colleagues. The governor stated it very well. There's no way that we'll ever have enough police officers in every street, in every neighborhood. And we're now starting to realize that there has been a vast amount of staffing out there that we have not utilized, and that's the citizens. And they're willing to get involved, and we haven't utilized that source for many, many years. Policing will definitely change, and we're going from a reactive policing mode that we've had in the past, where the crimes are committed, the citizen calls the police department, and hopefully we're not tied up and then we can respond right away. It's been a very reactive type of policing. That has to change, and it has to be a more proactive, and that's what we're seeing here, and that's something that we have to do more of. Being more proactive in reducing crime by not letting it happen in the first place. And when we have partnerships, for example, as we just saw, police teaming up with citizens, we can be so effective. They can call us, and we will tell them what chapter in their neighborhood they can join.
And would the neighborhood efforts be based church groups, civic groups, or just ad hoc groups for this alone?
Well, that's the neat thing about the new policing concept, that it's not just a partnership between the police and citizens. We encourage the business community to get involved. The church has been very actively now involved in getting the word out, and especially getting volunteers to join. The schools are very much a part of this partnership. So it's a total community involvement, not just two entities of our society, the citizens and the police.
Do you find that in the communities there's no shortage of volunteers, or is it an ordeal to get people at the assigned position, the assigned time of day?
One of the remarkable things that we found is that the people have just been waiting to be invited to come in. They have been wanting to, Law enforcement has not allowed that to happen in the past. We have, in the 3 years that this program has been implemented, we went from a very small handful of citizens, I think there was 12 in the Rose Park area when we first started. We're now approaching over 1,000 citizens that are involved in our Mobile Neighborhood Watch program in the city.
Thank you, Police Chief Ruben Ortega.
Thank you.
Other examples or other experiences with Neighborhood Watch? Yes, please.
I'm Terry Moon, and I'm representing Grantsville from the Grantsville Volunteer Summit. And Governor and First Lady, I would personally, for the City of Grantsville, like to thank you for bringing a national concept and allowing us to bring it down to a grassroots level in our communities. And I would just like to touch on something. For many, many years, we have been telling our youth, do not go to strangers, do not talk to strangers. So we are going to implement a project in Grantsville that we are going to call Safe Cars. That is where we are going to have stickers to go along with the safe neighborhood going on these vehicles so that the students can know and the children can know this is a safe vehicle if you run into a problem to approach, to go along, like I said, with the safe neighborhood. So once again, I'd like to thank you very much.
Thank you. That's a wonderful idea.
That is that up and running, or you're about to launch this?
No, we're about to launch it here in April. We're going through all the footwork, piloting the program, and I think it's going to be terrific, and it will go statewide. I'm almost positive that Grantsville will be able to pilot a program to be able to go statewide and possibly national-wide.
This is sort of a McGruff house on wheels?
It's something, yeah, something similar.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let me introduce you to another safe neighborhood program that is preemptive. Mentoring programs are often used to help young people who struggle scholastically. But a program administered by the Utah State Extension Service demonstrates mentoring has some strong effects upon young people beyond improving grades in school. Here's an example of that program at work in Cedar City.
This is called the SWAT circle. And a SWAT is this. Or this, but not this.
The purpose is to help youth make connections with older, good role models.
Great friendship, you know. I like working with younger kids. I want to be a coach when I'm done playing baseball.
That's the formula. College-age students who like kids and have some time to spend with them. The Utah State Extension Service has sprouted its mentoring program in several Utah communities. This one, in Cedar City, is fostering such friendships for its third year now. Sage Platt runs the program for Iron County. She echoes the philosophy that it takes a village to raise a child.
I think the kids have a friend that they know is dedicated to them, interested in them, somebody who cares about them, that's outside of their family group.
On this night, all the mentors, parents, and kids get together for dinner and activities. Among the mentors, several members of the Southern Utah University baseball team, just the kind of role model Sage Platt is looking for. Even a volunteer program has its costs. The Iron County version of the mentoring program pays the college kids a $300 scholarship and a little cash for gas and outings with their younger partners.
Most of them spend a lot of their own money, even though we try to give them a little bit of money to do activities with the kids. They just say, I don't feel like I should be using that money. I'm having a good time with the kids. So a lot of them spend money out of their own pocket.
The outings are hardly extravagant. Stuff like a root beer float and some one-on-one time at the local A&W, where mentor Jack Kernodle and his buddy Billy hang out together.
I'm an only child, so I mean, he's a lot of fun, so it's basically like a real brother.
Payoffs for the mentor and the mentoree. But what does the community get for its small investment?
The community gets kids who are more willing to be involved in the community. Hopefully, in the long run, we have better citizens. We have kids who turn into more positive adults and who are also, in turn, willing to reach out to someone else.
They're not going to let you fall. They won't let you fall.
The mentoring program here hopes to expand, not only in numbers, but in the age of its mentors. Sage Platt is asking for senior couples to join the family.
They bring wisdom, they bring patience, where the youth brings vitality and energy. the older couples, the older people who become involved with these couples bring a calmness and a peace and just a very genuine, unconditional love.
Mentoring. Do we have anyone in our audience who can speak to the issue of mentoring? Judge Valdez, please.
I think we need to reemphasize what the governor said, is that mentoring really is an example of how one person can make a difference. What we found in our court-based mentoring program, where we match kids that are referred for delinquency and also neglect with responsible adults, is we found that the adults instill in the child a belief that somebody cares about me. Most of the kids certainly aren't juvenile delinquents that we see every day, but all kids want the same thing. They want affection. They want somebody to care for them. It's often been said that 90% of human development is based on mentoring. Most of our mentors are not only concerned about the child, but they're also concerned about what kind of adult this child is going to become. My first week on the bench, I left on a Friday afternoon after hearing about 120 cases, and I felt, I need some help. I need help with adults, with responsible adults. And I started to call my friends, and I found out I didn't have as many friends as I thought. And so we did start our own court-based mentoring program. It's been very effective. And as I indicated, it does instill this belief in children that somebody cares about them. And most of these kids, especially in the court system, come from families where responsible adults are lacking or non-existent.
So where do you find these mentors?
What we've tried to do is we've tried to partnership with corporations, with the churches, with other business entities, and ask them to contribute 10% of their workforce to spend an hour a day with the child at a school setting or at a court setting. And we try to piggyback with Boys and Girls Club, with Big Brothers Big Sisters, with other existing mentoring programs so that they can participate in the same activities. So they're all volunteer. We do have someone who's paid to coordinate the program, but most of these mentors come from business and the private sector of the community.
So when a young person would come before you in juvenile court,
yes,
you may assign that youngster to participate as the junior partner in that team, in that mentoring team, to spend
correct.
time with an adult.
Exactly, and sometimes it supplements the probation officer or supplements other services, in-home services that we're trying with the Division of Child and Family Services and Youth Corrections and Probation. And the mentor usually becomes not only a role model for the child, but oftentimes a role model for the adults. We had a mother come to me one time and indicated, my daughter really respects her mentor. Maybe I ought to get a job. I think that's one of the reasons she respects her. Can you help me get a job? And so it does have a residue effect, and I think it's a very positive effect.
How long does that association last if a person starts to mentor?
There's no set time period. We've had some mentors mentoring for 4 years now, and we've had others that certainly had to move on and do other things. But I think mentoring sometimes could last a lifetime.
You call that a success story?
I call it an excellent success story.
Thank you very much, Judge Andrew Valdez. Others who may have had experience with mentoring. Yes, please, would you stand and introduce yourself?
Yes, my name's Susan Redd. I'm from Logan City, and I'm representing Cache Valley because this is a Cache Valley program that we've seen in effect. The mentoring program, as I've observed, and I'm just a mom and community volunteer, and what I've seen is the mentoring program has been grandparents coming and helping a family that's in need. Maybe a single mother that has teenage children and needs just a little bit of extra support, maybe a few parenting skills refined, just some of that aspect of just parenting and strengthening that family. And good things are happening as we see them working to prevent the problems. I don't see it from a judge's view. I see it just more support in the community.
That's a terrific model. You say you're just a mom and a community volunteer.
I am.
It doesn't get any better than that. That's what this conference is all about. Thank you very much. Chief Ortega again, please.
I'd like to comment on a mentoring program that we've undertaken here in the city. I have a traffic motorcycle squad that has adopted an elementary school in a mentoring program, Jackson Elementary. The officers spend an hour a week working with kids that the school feels need more one-on-one training or relationships. And what we have found is an incredible results of where the academic successes of the kids has increased tremendously. The disruption that would be caused by kids that are failing in school or feel like they're not keeping up has improved tremendously. And the relationship between the officers and the kids is just outstanding in terms of the positive things that the kids say about the police officers. So I would challenge other police departments across the state to look at allowing their officers to be mentors in some of these schools.
Sounds like a unique relationship where the mentor is a law enforcement officer that would really change the perception in the community of what a cop is, what a police officer
That's
does.
correct, and it's reaching out to these kids before they get to Judge Valdez's court in a truly preventive effort.
Another comment on mentoring. Yes, please, introduce yourself.
Yes. I'm Annalise Evans. I'm from the Lehigh community. I'm the community chair. And when we decided to do a mentoring program in our community, we really didn't know where to begin, where to start. We've had a lot of help from all of the committees and things, and a lot of support. The one thing that we have found in our community, though, is that this is something that is needed very, very badly. And something that the children that are going to be in the program that we have started are so excited about. They can't wait to get it started. They ask their teachers, when is this going to be started? But when we did come to the principals in our community and ask them, do you need something like this? Their eyes just lit up. Are you kidding? Who is going to help us with this? And our Miss Lehigh has taken this program under her wing and decided to make this her program, and it is very needed and very much appreciated in our community. So.
Wonderful. Thank you for leading on. We wish you success in that venture in Lehigh. Now, obviously, we aren't going to stop all forms of crime or be able to keep young people from acting out. We know that some of them are going to have a brush with the law, and some may end up in court, and some may even end up in jail. Here's a success story from a different kind of courtroom, however, which gives youthful offenders a chance to change. This is Nephi City's Youth Court.
This is a pretrial meeting of the Nephi City Youth Court. High school-age kids who have in their hands the powers of a court of law.
I don't know, do you guys want to have her send him another show cause? Because he hasn't fulfilled your sentencing. I think so. Yeah.
Andy Cindrich is one of the founders of Nephi's Youth Court, which is modeled after another such program in American Fork. Youth courts take the violators that juvenile courts don't have time to process.
The 7th grade girl took the cigarettes out of her grandmother's refrigerator where she's been hiding. Apparently, she's really struggled. She's, struggled in school. She struggled with a lot of stuff.
A service learning grant from the school district and equipment donations from the city helped get Youth Court off the ground 14 months ago. It's fully staffed by high school students, including a 3-judge panel, bailiffs, prosecutors.
The prosecutors tell us what happened, the kid's case and all that, and then we ask them questions about what happened, why they did it, and just try to give their side of the story, and then we decide what we think that they deserve to pay back.
And a court recorder.
I do all the computer work and the computer entry, and so like if what they're sentenced to, I enter in, and then when they bring their slips back, I put them in the computer. So just make sure everything gets filed right.
On this night, Nephi's Youth Court will hear 6 cases involving minors using tobacco, curfew violations, and underage drivers. The judges assess the defendant's demeanor and honesty, then prescribe a sentence, usually consisting of community service hours and a substantial homework assignment designed to address the crime. Youth Court can order the defendant to attend a drug, alcohol, and tobacco addiction class, but it cannot issue fines. The court does collect a $20 fee. Youth Court not only takes the pressure off the juvenile court's caseload, it encourages police officers to make arrests they might otherwise ignore.
Well, they know that something's going to happen to the kids. Too often when they arrest a kid for a tobacco violation, what would happen is the juvenile court system is too bogged down to deal with a tobacco violation when they have so many other more serious offenses to deal with.
Next up, an accused violator of Nephi's minor curfew law.
While on routine patrol, Officer Johnson came across an auto accident on north side of Golf Course at approximately 2 o'clock a.m. Amber was a passenger and in a violation of Nephi City curfew.
Amber admits she was out too late. Her forthright approach and consideration of a heavy workload and school schedule buys some leniency from her peers.
5 hours community service. This is actually quite low based on the circumstances. And because of your work, we'll give you like 2 weeks to complete this by.
You know, it's really hard because you know these kids in school, where we come from a small community, and you know extra stuff about them. So it's really hard, not taking that stuff and having that interfere with your judging. I think it's better than juvenile court because we're on a one-on-one basis, and they're with their peers. They're not talking to an adult.
And what if the accused offender fails to show? What if he or she doesn't complete the court sentence? A tight relationship with juvenile court gives youth court an added implied threat.
We had a girl that was here and she was fined $250 for a truancy because her mom thought that the juvenile court would go easier on her. And we told the juvenile court judge that she had an opportunity to come to youth court, didn't want to come, so the judge slapped her with a $250 fine. And that's pretty serious motivation to try youth court.
What other advantages do you see in having sanctions of a youth court as opposed to that which might be meted out in a juvenile court? Any participants here? Would you speak to that?
Well, my name's Dana Kidd, and we just started a youth court in Logan City, and we've been able to tell the effectiveness of the youth court after only having it for 3 months. Some of a particular individual came in for shoplifting, and he was a really good kid. His first offense, and now he is thinking about joining youth court. He's coming to all of our meetings, and he's just made a complete 180-degree change in his life.
You sit on the youth court, Dana?
I do.
How were you chosen to be one of the participants?
You go through an application process and through interviews. Kind of difficult, but it's worth it.
And does that set up any difficulties with you interacting with your peers? Well, Dana, she's on the court. We've got to be careful how we deal with her.
No, actually, I've made a lot of good friends from defendants who've come in through youth court. One of them I work with, and the particular individual who's joining youth court is a very neat individual. They're all really good people.
And do these people take you seriously? Because unlike Judge Valdez, you're not really a judge, or that's what they might think.
Actually, yeah, talking to offenders who've been through the youth court program, a lot of them say that they came in expecting it to be a lot easier than juvenile court, and from what I gather from their comments, they've actually found it a lot harder.
But your decisions have the force of law. They have to be
do.
carried out. Are there other sanctions?
They do, or else they're sent to juvenile court.
And how many times do you get the or else, and how many times do they comply with what you asked them to do?
Well, because we've only been in process for 3 months, we haven't had too many return cases yet, but everything has been working like machinery so far.
That's good. Keep
Yeah.
that up. Thank you. Dana Kidd, let me ask, well, you hand that mic to Judge Valdez, if you would, just a second. We'll take this out of order. We heard someone on the tape say that youth court was a lot better than a juvenile court. Now,
yeah, I heard that.
Give us some authority view on that.
I'll tell you what youth court does offer is positive peer pressure. And usually they'll listen to their peers, I think, probably more so than a judge on occasion. I have to have a hammer over their head sometimes. My boy was on the peer, he was a peer judge at West High. And he told me that one boy told him, I'd rather appear before you than your father, so, that's why I'm staying here. So I'm not sure.
Is that largely because of peer pressure, which is wholly absent, I would guess, in the juvenile court setting?
Yeah, well, the peer pressure in the juvenile court setting and certainly in the institutions and facility is negative peer pressure.
Right.
So I think the positive peer pressure is very effective with these kids.
All right, thank you. Now, you took that microphone away from another participant. Would you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Ryan Yates. I'm on the Logan Peer Court. Besides the aspect of peer pressure, we also mentor. As we've been talking about mentoring, we get together. Not only are we saying as peers that we don't accept this activity that you're involved in, but we're going to help you out. And we're going to make you a better person. We mentor. We call them once a week and see how they're doing. See if they have any questions about it. If they need anything. Just like a young man in our peer court, he's a really good kid, and we've helped him out. He wanted to join. We've made it such a positive experience for him. He wants to join now. He feels that it's a good program, and everybody we've talked to says that they like the way it's being handled, and they like being judged by their peers rather than older adults in juvenile court.
Ryan, who supervises you, works with you, gives you training, and tells you what your range of options might be as you deal with
Right now it's Logan City Police Department, because we're part of Logan City Peer Court, and basically we went through a two and a half month training, and got trained to do what we're supposed to do, and it's working out great. As Dana stated, it's just like machine work. Everything's going in how it has been planned, and we do come up with a couple problems here and there, but we have advisors that help us out with different aspects of it. So it's not just like we're left alone.
Never concerned for retaliation, that you meted out a certain obligation on someone and they meet you in a dark alley and you're concerned about that?
We actually talked about this in the interview before we were chosen. They asked us how we would deal with that. I've never had a problem at my school. I've been a peer mentor to many people in my school, and they actually like it. They're not threatening me. I mean, they look up to me because I'm part of peer court, and they just want to do what they're supposed to do now because of peer court. It's a positive experience, and they realize that. They realize that it doesn't have a negative effect on them.
It's great innovation. Thank you, Ryan. Chief Ortega, please.
Yes, and you know, in order for enforcement of our laws to be effective, the adjudication has to be swift and has to be sure. And unfortunately, in many cases where young people are involved in infractions of our laws, it could take months before that case is adjudicated in the juvenile court. The difference between the peer court and the juvenile court is it gets done very fast, very quickly. And the punishment is very sure. It could be community work, or it could be other things that the judge gives these kids. The two things that I like about it, that we're seeing some major successes with peer court, is that one, it gets the case before the peer judge and that court very quickly. And second, our officers realize that something's going to happen, that they'll see something happen right away. And the third thing that I didn't mention is that the kids take it seriously. You know, the perception was, when it was first initiated here several years ago in Salt Lake City, was that the kids would not take this seriously. You know, this was going to be something like, you know, something fun or different, and nothing really would happen. To the contrary, what we're seeing is that they take it serious, and they take their sanctions that are imposed on them very seriously as well.
Can you respond to the question of how another community would set up a peer court such as this?
I think the first thing they could do is work with the police department, and let the department help them set it up, and work with the juvenile court in that district. That's the three partnerships, really, and get it started in the school, in the high schools where we started it here. And it was a partnership between the school, ourselves, and the juvenile judge.
All right, thank you very much, Chief Ortega. Another comment, please.
Yes, my name is Georgia Block. I currently serve as the public education representative on the Commission on Criminal and Juvenile Justice, and I also teach 6th grade in Granite School District. For myself personally, our school was adopted by one of the local church groups. And one particular year I had 24 different people coming in as volunteers during the week to read with children, and it was astounding to me the interest that they had in that. It was always, it's my turn. I haven't had a turn in a week yet. Can I please read? And that interest, and as they began to know the people within their own community, the difference that made. So I commend you for the ALERT program, but also the impact that it does have on children in the education system today and the needs that are there. Thank you.
And once more, Dana, again from Cache Valley.
I would just like to reinforce what Chief Ortega was talking about. It seems like the juvenile court is getting a little bit of a bad rap, but I would like to say that the youth court programs would be nothing without the juvenile court. It is a partnership, and the most serious cases that we deal with are Class B misdemeanors, and it's up to the juvenile courts to take on those more serious cases that we're not ready to handle.
As you can see, these peer judges are very polished and they're very diplomatic. Thank you very much. It gives us a great deal of confidence. These are marvelous ideas that are community-based solutions people are devising on their own, and obviously there are many more ideas for making neighborhoods safe. So now we want to give the opportunity to you who are gathered in your community discussion groups around the state time to talk about this. To explain your charge, let me again call upon Governor Leavitt.
Thank you, Bruce, and thank you to all of you. The fact that you're gathered here together with others to discuss issues and simply viewing at home on TV shows that you care. And that's the first step. The second is to translate that concern into action. In just a few minutes, this television program is going to end. And those of you who are gathered in high schools across the state and those of you who are at home will have a chance to pick up where we left off. Can you select from the ideas that we have here, safe neighborhoods, and then design additional plans specific to your communities and families? Yes. And as we've heard from the speakers that made presentations today, involvement can be as simple as having a frank conversation with your children about drugs, about what it can mean, or what it can mean to form a neighborhood watch patrol, becoming a mentor, or volunteering your time to make a difference in the life of a child or another adult. The key word here is involvement. We have to be aware of crime and take certain measures to protect life and property, but it is unacceptable that we as a people should ever become prisoners to it. A government could do nothing but build prisons. But without caring, involved citizens and people willing to take a stand with words and actions, we as a state will just be responding to the problem, not striking at the heart through prevention. Now, there is so much that we can do, and I hope now that you will brainstorm and decide individually what you can do and then collectively put your ideas on the table. The Governor's Initiative on Families Today program, Utah's Promise, and other state organizations will help you coalesce those ideas and put them into play in your community. I applaud your concern and your commitment. We can have a state where children go off to school free of drugs and gangs and walk home from school in groups just for the fun of it, not for the fear of it. That's our goal. That's the right of every person in this state. And that's our expectation today and our challenge for tomorrow, that as we approach a new century and a new millennium, we'll be a safe and prosperous state. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Governor Leavitt, Mrs. Leavitt, Sister Margot, Elder Morrison. We appreciate you all making this event possible. And thanks to the thousands of you who are now ready to create your own safe neighborhoods. It's a most important endeavor that affects the quality of life for each of us. So we wish you good luck and success.